Welcome to Chicago International Organ Academy. I'm Philip Kleckner, the Artistic Director and Founder, and this is Tabitha Moldenauer, our Program Director. Today we're going to be talking about playing hymns, and specifically we're working on Holy God, We Praise Thy Name, a hymn that is common to many denominations. The tune name is Großer Gott, and hopefully you will find that easily in a hymnal or song collection that you are using. What are the kinds of things that we want to touch on today?
The first thing that you always want to look at when you're looking at a new hymn is the rhythm, because the rhythm is what's going to lead the hymn singing and your hymn playing.
Really? There are all those notes. What about all those notes? How can you possibly prioritize rhythm over notes?
Because that's what is going to lead your congregation.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that playing all the right notes is, of course, important, but the notes themselves need a rhythmic structure, a pulse, and that will help to move the congregation along and to lead the singing. So here we have a hymn that is in 3/4. And if I play this strictly, we get a sound like this.
Which is pretty mechanical.
Very mechanical, and what I would recommend is that you actually think of grouping these quarter notes into groups of 3, so that there's one large pulse per measure, one big beat per measure on the first beat of each measure. Let's see what that sounds like.
Which sounds completely different. It's much more musical. You have groups of notes instead of individual notes, and that it seems like a very minor thing, but that makes a huge difference in how a group of singers will sing. And they don't even have to know what's going on. They will just naturally sing better if the organist is grouping things into larger beats rather than thinking of each individual quarter note or each individual eighth note. It makes a really, really big difference, because for whatever reason, the organist concept of the rhythm is what will lead the singing.
That really projects whatever you have in your mind and in your ear will be picked up.
So we have great power as organists. We can either make the singing much, much stronger, or we can kill it completely if we start thinking in little tiny chopped up beats.
Yeah, so for all your hymns, try to figure out what the basic pulse should be. Sometimes we have hymns that are written in 4/4 that are better imagined and felt in 2/2 or in groups of 2. So that's an investigation that you should spend some time with. For this particular hymn, once we've figured out this pulse, a pulse of one beat, one large beat per measure, let's look at some of the other things that we can do to help encourage good legato musical singing. And I'd like to focus on the many repeated notes that are in this texture.
And we have to keep in mind too that this is choral music. This is not really organ music. We are transferring choral music to the organ. So where it has, the first 3 chords are identical. So if you play that, if you attack and release every single note of those first 3 chords, it will be very, very choppy and hard for your singers to follow, because that's not how a singer would sing that.
That's an excellent point. So you should do what you need to do at the organ to connect any repeated notes in the 3 lower parts, the bass, the tenor, and the alto. So if I play everything exactly as it appears written in the hymnal, you'll get a sound like this.
Which is choppy.
It's hard to play that in one. It's harder to
Right.
play that in one that way, and it's very, very choppy.
And that won't lead good singing, it will lead choppy singing.
It will communicate that effect, and that's not what we want to do when we're singing and playing our hymns. So if I connect all of the inner voices and carefully maintain the articulations and the repetitions in the soprano and the melody line, we have something that sounds like this. So you can make a few judicious repetitions for emphasis of various sorts, but in general, you'll get a smoother sound when you are connecting all of these inner voices. That should be your default, and between phrases, depending upon the acoustics in the room that you're dealing with, you may want to add a few repetitions, a few articulations in, but I think you'll find that this will give you the most desirable and most successful quality of the sound coming from the organ, and therefore the best support of the congregation.
And how do you shape the phrases so that you make sure that people have a chance to breathe where they need to breathe?
This is an interesting and complex subject, insofar as I don't think that you can apply any one formula to every single verse of every single hymn.
Right.
You want to begin looking at the text and looking at the sense of the text, looking at the punctuation, and consider where you'll make your musical breaks as opposed to where you will make your textual breaks or not make them. You want to maintain the sense of the poetry, and this is a great example here in the first two verses of Holy God, we praise thy name. The first verse at the beginning, the first couple of lines is, Holy God, we praise thy name. Lord of all, we bow before thee. Same music, same part of the hymn for the second verse. Hark, the glad celestial hymn angel choirs above are raising.
With no punctuation after the first phrase.
No punctuation. So you always have to be aware of where the musical phrases, where the musical articulations and the textual articulations align and where they differ. And we're always going to have in hymns a regular musical articulation, a regular stopping places, harmonic stopping places in the hymn, but those don't always line up as it does here at the end of the first four measures in verse 1, as opposed to the end of the first four measures in verse 2.
So in verse 1, you would cut that dotted half note on name a little bit shorter so that to recognize the punctuation there, the semicolon. But in verse 2, you would just play through.
Play through it. So whenever you are making a musical and a textual break, articulation, you always want to take the time off the note that you're already playing. You want to shorten slightly the duration.
You never want to be late.
Never want to be late to the beginning of the next phrase. So here we go. Let's try first verse, first 8 measures. Now, second verse, first 8 measures we're going to carry through at the end of the 4th measure. Big difference.
Yes. And that will help your singers too. All of this is so that we can do our jobs better by leading the church's song in a way that is the most effective that we can.
How likely is it that you think congregations with varying degrees of musical understanding and perception are going to be able to make those differences and follow along?
Well, anecdotally, from my own experience, from the experience of other organists I know, it actually does make a really big difference.
So they'll pick up on these details if you're consistent with them.
They do.
Over a period of time.
They do. And I've had people come up to me and they will say, I don't know what you're doing, but I know that we're singing better. So even if they don't have the technical knowledge to know what is going on that's different in the organ playing, they will respond just naturally, even as largely untrained singers, and sing better and feel more comfortable singing.
How about if we go through one verse from the beginning to the end?
Sure. We hope you found this discussion of this hymn helpful. Hopefully you can use some of these ideas and transfer it to other hymns as well. If you have any questions, please put those in the comments below. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for joining us.